All right, so the theme of high change is going to come out quite prominently in this talk. And I think I wanted to start by acknowledging that there's been quite a lot of evolution in UX practices in the past couple decades. Mainstream popularity of design thinking. We have a much better integration of our creative and our structural and analytic design disciplines to create holistic user experiences. And we have more powerful and efficient tools, particularly for rapid prototyping and for user feedback, so that we can learn faster. And then most importantly, and relative to the topic of rapid change and high change, is we've moved into models that super large delivery. And so what we're focused on is providing incremental functionality to provide incremental value to end users. All of that's on the bright side. There's going to be a but coming here. And as Indira Gandhi cautioned, popularity is not a guarantee of quality. And unfortunately, what I've seen in many of the organizations that I've been working with over the past decade in particular is that we're starting to cut corners. We're in the spirit of rapid deployment of functionality. We are now focused more on incremental delivery. And what I'm noticing is that we're missing often one very critical step in the design process, and that is the high-level design, which establishes the foundations of your design. So before I get into the details of my thoughts around that, I just wanted to sidestep to an analogy here in the urban planning domain. This is a map of part of London. London epitomizes organic growth, that it has evolved essentially, the street architecture has evolved from a cluster of villages and townships. There's actually been little, if any, deliberate macro level city planning of the street architecture. And as a result, this might suit the use case or usage scenario of a tourist wandering aimlessly, looking to come upon surprises and delight. However, for what is considered typically a very important primary usage scenario in navigation of cities is efficient transportation of goods and people. And here, London fails, unfortunately. I'm going to contrast this with the urban grid or other simple geometric structures such as hub and spoke. We're looking here at a historical map of the city of Toronto and the city of Toronto plan. This was actually planned as an urban grid. That's my hometown, Toronto, by the way. And this was planned as an urban grid back in the late 19th century. Here, what we're doing is we're setting up very simple, understandable, and efficient structures for roads and associated infrastructure of utilities, et cetera, that enable a larger extension of the city to be planned without filling in all the details in the neighborhoods and districts. And as Toronto has grown over the years, this model here can be extended without introducing new conceptual ideas. And so the navigability of the city, notwithstanding the traffic, has been really effective. And I'm going to jump now back into the domain of digital products, where we recognize that in addition to finding things, there's all kinds of other sophisticated ways of interacting with digital products. And they too require planning for ease of extendability and effectiveness. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about that. What I want to do is I want to just look at a bit of a sampling here of the general design processes that we are using to communicate with our clients, to communicate amongst ourselves, with our employers, the various stakeholders who are involved in this. And the design thinking, as we're now recognizing, is becoming more prominent. It's being accepted into many of the organizations in which we work. And it really starts here with establishing an understanding of the problem space through the empathy and experience research that we conduct to extract insights that then allow us to formulate a strategy in the form of design principles or experience strategy, or there's a number of ways we can essentially say, here's what the solution has to do to be effective and to meet the experience outcomes that we understand are important to our end user community and the business outcomes. So I'm going to start walking through some models of this, and the point I want to make out is that there is, among these models that we are using to guide our own design thinking, no attention paid to the importance of planning or architecting the design before we step into the details of design. And that's caused some bad behaviors. One of the bad behaviors that is caused, that I've seen, is that most of our project plans don't include a stage where we actually take the time to create the design architecture or this high-level design. This is the genesis of that double diamond. It's the UK Design Council. It was introduced as a framework for innovation. I can't say enough about how important this is to introduce the human-centered thinking and the empathy and so forth. However, we aren't handed any guidance in this particular model about really how to go about design in a rigorous way that's going to protect us over time as we release individual features and functionality. So you can see some of the items here that are communicated. There's no detail here. If I get into a slightly more detailed representation of the double diamond model, you can see now that we have ideate and prototype, and ideation, always a great thing to be opening up the aperture and considering lateral ideas. Prototyping, I have a concern with that as guidance. Prototyping to me is a technique that can be used across the entire design process. I've seen it used effectively in executing foundational research as a point of stimulus in order to open up the lens and understand end user needs and other parts along the process as well. So we need to be a bit more specific here. This is another more detailed view of the design thinking process that was posted by Dan Nestler, and it talks about test and analyze as well. Again, ideate, prototype. This is the general guidance around how we arrive at effective designs. I'm going to turn attention now from the double diamond model to the 5-step linear process that was introduced by Stanford Design School. And again, we have ideate, prototype, and test. There is some guidance around idea generation, about brainstorming and so forth, and there's some guidance around tools and philosophy of prototyping. Again, there's really no attention paid to the importance of establishing a foundation of design before you get into the details. This is another globally recognized thought leader in the interaction design and experience design space, the Interaction Design Foundation. And here, this model talks about tests to create new ideas and about prototypes sparking a new idea. I feel like we're trivializing what has to happen in this design space. And I don't think it does us a service, and I don't think it does a service to our clients. Now, as I'm talking to you, I know I'm preaching to the converted in this conversation, and it's really about a call to action, that it sort of behooves us to be a bit more deliberate in defining what it is that actually has to happen to get this right. This is the Nielsen-Norman model, another globally respected organization in the user experience space. And here, the guidance for ideation is to generate a range of crazy creative ideas. And then in the prototyping, we build real tactile representation for a range of ideas. So again, I worry that this is a bit misleading and not respecting the rigor of the design process. Imagine urban planners. If that was their brief, we just need you to create a range of crazy creative ideas for this city. There'll probably be a great range of circuses and symphonies, but are we going to really identify the structure of the city that is going to be able to support the key use cases? This is the roller coaster model based on IDEO. Different model, same conclusion. and another model looking at kind of how we integrate agile and experience design in this lean UX model. And again, there's no specific guidance here. So I think I've kind of effectively described that every one of these models doesn't differentiate between a foundational level of design. As a result, what are we doing? We're doing what feels right, what's worked in the past. We go where our skills, knowledge, and our talents inspire us. And in the spirit of rapid deployment and sprint-based execution, we're often accommodating the push for delivery and sacrificing the importance of stopping and creating this design foundation. Now, I've referred to this as high-level design. That's kind of how it's broadly described. We think of it in other terms as well: conceptual design, experience architecture. At Blink, we refer to this as a North Star design or a design vision. Whatever you call it, this is a call to action that we need to pay more attention to it. Now, why? Why is it important? So reiterating, we're in a world of delivering software products and platforms in increments. Incremental functionality is released to provide incremental value. And in that world, change is a necessity. We are designing change, and therefore we need to design for change. And I propose that the way to design for change, to ensure that it's graceful change rather than disruptive change, is to start with a North Star design. So we have this overall goal of this North Star design to create the conditions where you're minimizing the impact of change, at least the negative impact, on all of our stakeholders. Now, let's start with just our colleagues, our business and product owners, the development team, and the design team. For us to be able to manage change and minimize churn, we would like to have a stable and robust platform and a foundation as makes sense, to the extent that we're able to project into the future and understand the usage of the platform and the product. Now let's go, of course, to the most important player in the game here, which is the end users. We talk about the psychology of change aversion. And we have to recognize that people aren't necessarily averse to change. They're averse to disruption, and disruption that they don't understand the value of. And so here's where, again, I feel the importance of the foundational design in the robustness and minimizing disruption. Jared Spool of User Interface Engineering has a great term for this from the user perspective. He refers to it as embraceable change. He's got a great article up on his site I encourage you to read. So to summarize, this purpose of the North Star design is to minimize the impact of change on all stakeholders. Now, a design that has the following attributes, or as I say, a North Star design that are foundational or high-level design, has to have the following attributes in my mind to do a good job of this. One is scalability. So we need to anticipate into the future, and so that our architecture doesn't get disrupted. And this is, of course, what our technical architects are doing as well, right? They're looking at various aspects of the technology stack, from data management and application management and all the integrations and various other aspects of the platform from a technology perspective. These are not decisions that are being made as functionality is being released during our sprints. These are decisions that are being made prior to or up to sprint zero. And we need to be doing the same thing. Optimization is another key here. So all of the guidance that we've seen so far is about kind of coming up with a bunch of crazy ideas and then trying some out, picking the ones that, based on our experience, we think are most promising. We'll try them out and we'll get some feedback. So I'm going to make an analogy, and I don't want to make this disparaging, but really it reminds me of the infinite monkey theorem. And that is when theoretical mathematicians postulated that given enough time, 1,000 monkeys on typewriters could reproduce the entire works of William Shakespeare. So again, it's a bit of an extreme analogy, but the point is what we're saying our process needs to be is to come up with some great ideas, and throw them at the wall and see which ones stick. And that's the kind of the iterative user feedback that we'll get on it. And I'm proposing we never have enough time. Obviously, the monkeys might have infinite time, but we are always under time constraints. And within those time constraints, we need to choose our areas of focus very wisely. And so not only am I saying we need to focus on those aspects of the high-level design that ensure scalability and graceful change, but we also need to not sweat the details. We need to know what it is that we can defer until later. The last point here is that we end up getting early buy-in so that, again, we avoid the churn of introducing something structural or really foundational that ends up disrupting our own internal development process. Okay, so I've talked about why I think it's important and how it is not so well represented right now. So the question is, where does this happen and what does it include? So I believe we need to modify this 5-step process. First of all, we talk about test as a step at the end. And I think all of us have mature processes where we know we're not going to wait until the end to test. What we are going to do is we're going to be iterating and testing and revising as we move along. So that's one adjustment that I propose to this 5-step model. The next adjustment is that we're not prototyping per se. We are creating a North Star design or a high-level design. After the ideation and all of the opportunity for lateral thinking is floated through whoever is able to come up with creative ideas, then the design team needs to establish the foundations of the design. And that needs to happen prior to the detailed design. And here's how I then map this onto our agile process. Just like the technical design, this North Star design needs to happen in sprint 0, validated through end user feedback. This is how that model would appear in the double diamond. The approach would appear in the double diamond model. Okay, so I've talked about where it happens. Now, what is it? Now, this is not the right answer per se. This is what I have learned through my experience in my career are the most important facets to focus on to ensure that we have stability in the foundation of the design over the long term to minimize the impact, the negative impact of change. So let's start with interaction model. Now, all these are going to be familiar, so it's not that I'm sort of exposing new concepts. It's more about how we use them and how we promote them. But I'm going to just to be clear about what I'm thinking about these elements. So the interaction model, it addresses what's the nature of the solution. What interaction style does it drive? Themes and metaphors. What sense and image does it convey? And this is foundational to setting expectations on the end user's part of how am I going to interact with this product or platform. Some examples here, and I'll pull out a couple as examples. So you can differentiate a traditional website, page-based website, as one interaction model from a portal website that has modules or portlets that have their own kind of behavior and can be placed in various locations, can be maximized to page level. These all set expectations for interaction, these models. An interview style that was popularized through TurboTax. And then there's kind of some of these metaphors that are coming up. The paper document is, which are word processing applications are still relying on for good reasons. Again, it's another interaction model. In a sovereign application like a word processing document or the spreadsheet that you see above it, we have a model of interacting with actions that are through ribbons and menus, as opposed to when we're navigating through a website where you don't typically see those things, and you don't typically see a lot of links in our application models. And browsing shelves, we're still in Blockbuster, browsing shelves on almost every streaming video service that I have seen. I'm looking forward to an evolution from that. However, again, it sets an expectation, people understand it. Okay, so I've said enough about the interaction model. The second element here is the high-level information architecture. So again, we've moved from a point where we have these very large static pages of brochureware online, and we're executing hierarchical representations of every one of these pages down to the small branches and fine leaves. The point of that needs to be focused on here is the high-level structure. And this can apply to any one of those interaction models with different representations, but it's just about the high level. It's about the primary organizing concepts for how to interact with the content and functionality in the platform. It's about supporting navigation mechanisms that enable that interaction. This is right out of the Polar Bear series from Lou Rosenfeld and Peter Morville on information architecture for the World Wide Web. This is the high-level blueprint. Again, this isn't getting down to all the tiny leaves and branches. This is just establishing the concepts that ensure that we're able to understand and interact with the content and functionality of the solution. Here's an example. This is just small excerpts from quite a large representation of the information architecture that we at Blink did in the consolidation of over 3,000 web assets from NASA into a sort of single unified experience. Again, decisions made. Each of these types of menus have a conceptual purpose, and so those need to be conceptualized and then design, navigation mechanisms designed to achieve those. All right, so interaction model and high-level IA. Now global components come into play here. So these are now the landmarks of your solution. They help you stay oriented. They set expectations for their usage, and they simply ensure a level of consistency so that you are able to, again, thinking about all of the functionality that you're able to envision for your product or platform, you're using these tools to ensure that you have the flexibility and the extensibility that you will need as far as you can anticipate. Some examples of these: window management, window handling, panels, overlays, secondary windows, etc. I'll just call out as an example here of a global, maybe not a non-conventional global utility element here, which is this third one, the site-wide filter. In this particular case, for a website that was prominently informational, the user could self-identify and get a specific view and perspective on the content. And this is a utility pervasively that follows you around the site. Messaging architecture, I mentioned again, is kind of one of those components that's important. These are just examples, of course. There may be others that are more suitable to your applications. Then we focus on key design patterns. And here's where we start to blur the lines a little bit with detailed design, because for certain aspects of your design that address the moments that matter, you need to really figure out whether this stuff is going to deliver against the value that users are expecting. At Blink, we refer to these as signature experiences. These are the elements of your solution that make your solution unique and effective and stand out. So they form the core of your interactive concept, and if we don't get that right up front, then again, we're going to have problems as we start to evolve. Here's an example in an application, a travel application, Kayak, and I've highlighted a couple of areas here where design patterns have to be thought of and established. This is maybe a little bit rudimentary because of the fact that it doesn't necessarily change and have the level of sophistication. However, they're seeding a search and they're seeing search results. Certain aspects of attributes of each of those parts of the use case need to be designed in a way which are effective. So these are so core to the essence of this application that we need to get those things right. And then you can layer on top of that, well, then we need to sort, we need to filter, and how are we going to present those aspects? Again, you can start sweating the details later in terms of which are the primary filters, which are the secondary filters, what's the sequence of sort and so forth. Those are things that can happen. But in terms of establishing this framework, these are key. Here's another example of key design patterns. This is actually for a client who's focused on creating training simulation and then real tools to manage disasters. And this is a simulation of a disaster response for a hurricane. And this is an overview, essentially a dashboard that at a glance provides a sense of status across a bunch of different jurisdictions. A signature pattern that we felt was so foundational to the effectiveness of the design. We wanted to look at this one early. Okay, those are the 4 elements. The last one here is the primary layouts. And again, this is bread and butter for our design discipline, establishing form factors, the layouts of the primary pages, templates and views, responsive behaviors. And, you know, we've seen this and we use this. We establish grids, we establish layouts on top of those grids. Here's an example from e-commerce, facets on the left, for example, and primary, you got hero images and you know, other aspects of your listings in this case. So together, what we've got are 5 elements of a North Star design. And my appeal to this design community is, A, ensure the project plan includes a high-level design phase or a North Star design phase. Get into your plans, make sure everybody understands why it's there. Get these things that we've talked about right first, get your buy-in, and then it's time to start sprinting. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Paul. One thing that came up in there, and I love the concept, and it kind of, as you made the parallel that like there's an architecture kind of equivalent taking place for the technical side. One thing I've seen is that people are pushing back against that architecture on the technical side because there's the risk that you're going to over-engineer the solution. So what advice do you give to people that if they argue for and they win and they get this kind of phase into their projects, how do you ensure that they don't fall into that trap of over-engineering?
So I'm going to sort of interpret over-engineering from 2 perspectives. One is that you're actually generating a solution which is going to exceed the boundaries of what's actually needed or to provide value for your end users. So we've established our priorities in the problem space, and then we've kind of said, yeah, hey, but we've got all this ability to go beyond that. And to me, that's over-engineering. The other aspect might be that we're not in sync with the technical platform or the technology platform. So there's a misalignment there. And then to that end, I'd say just the same way that we play with our technology and development peers in the sprint releases, we should be playing in the same sandbox. And in an ideal world, we have the opportunity, in fact, to establish the underpinnings of the experience design and the architecture well before we've finished making the decisions about our technology stack.
Great. Yeah, so that's a great point. More collaboration, and yeah, hopefully that we'll be able to solve the problem. So yeah, I do think it's a good point that there are 2, if not even the third one, that we might making assumptions that the customers want something when it's not in fact true. But I'd love to keep asking you lots of questions because I have loads, but and if anybody does, we can share them in the Slack channel and we'll ask Paul to answer them there. But unfortunately, we're out of time for Paul's session. But thank you very much, Paul.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's attention.